Yo, what's good everyone? One Piece chapters 1190 and 1191 take the battle to another level. Luffy is saved by Gaban, who finally enters the fight against the king of the world, and he shows us some of the craziest displays of Conqueror's Haki we've seen so far. But then Imu takes things even further, revealing a terrifying new transformed form. Now Gaban, Luffy, Hajrudin, and Loki have no choice but to stand together against him, launching a combined attack straight at the king of the world. So, without wasting any more time, let's jump straight into some peak One Piece. The chapter opens right where 1189 left off. Imu had Luffy completely pinned down, and was swinging the Xingtian axe in for the kill. Gaban stepped in and blocked it, and the force from that block is no joke. The shockwave from the clash is strong enough to blast the massive branch of the treasure tree atom that Luffy was pinned against. The swords that had been impaled into Luffy get knocked loose from his body by the shockwave, and Luffy himself gets thrown away from the center of the battlefield by the impact. He's out of the immediate danger zone for now, but he's still in rough shape, wounded and groaning. Imu spots the new intruder and immediately closes in to deal with him. Gaban dodges the attack by leaping into the air in an instant, and gets his first proper look at Imu from above. He looks visibly surprised by the ruler's bizarre and otherworldly appearance. Imu directly asks who he is. Gaban identifies himself as someone who understands the world, which is carrying a real double meaning since he's one of the only people alive who actually reached Laugh Tale and knows the world's deepest secrets. But before turning his attention fully back to Imu, Gaban wheels around and grabs Luffy first, and he is not gentle about it. Gaban looks at the state Luffy is in and is openly disappointed. He tells him how embarrassing it is that an old man had to come and save an emperor of the sea. He tells Luffy that being an emperor means nothing, and that having a white form, meaning Gear 5, means nothing either. He tells him not to get cocky over it. Luffy is injured and groaning, telling Gaban to let him go, but Gaban is not interested in that. He asks Luffy flat out if he intends to die here. Luffy just groans and says he won't die. Gaban tells him bluntly that he might as well be dying given how pathetic he looks right now. Then Gaban asks Luffy what happens if he does die here. Luffy, still in pain, manages to respond that he won't be able to save Elbaf, his friend's home. Gaban presses again and asks what happens to his crew. Luffy answers that his crew would be in danger. Gaban acknowledges those answers, but he keeps going. He tells Luffy that the sea is dangerous. The higher you climb, the more enemies you make. And then he gets to the line that gives the chapter its title. He tells Luffy that the title of Pirate King is not something that brings peace or comfort, it brings a target. There will always be people who want that throne, and those people will celebrate when the Pirate King dies. That death is something the world will rejoice over. He tells Luffy that if he is going to approach this fight by winging it and having fun without taking it seriously, he should just go home. And if he cannot do that either, then right now he is just in the way. Lecture done, Gaban physically throws Luffy away like a ragdoll, sending him out of the immediate battlefield. Luffy just groans as he lands, and he is clearly not happy about being talked down to like that after getting saved. Imu, meanwhile, has just been standing there silently observing the whole exchange. Then Gaban turns back to Imu, and the fight begins. Gaban opens with his Mantis Axe style. The technique is called Kamakuri Buppyo, Torabai, a rolling spinning assault where he comes at Imu with both axes. Imu blocks it by rotating the Xingtian axe, shutting the attack down without much visible effort. Imu asks curiously what is going on. Gaban, while still engaging, asks Imu back whether it is not true that he wants Luffy dead. Imu responds coldly and directly, confirming that yes, he does. Gaban then asks if Luffy reminds Imu of Joy Boy. That question lands differently. Imu stops and asks Gaban what exactly he knows, and while asking, he reaches into his omen and draws another weapon. This is the 10th weapon from Imu's arsenal, Honabami Toshiro. The name translates to Bone Eater or Bone Gnawer, and this is actually a real historical weapon from Japanese history. The original Honabami Toshiro was a wakizashi, a short sword, that was first forged as a naginata, which is a polearm, all the way back in the 13th century during the Kamakura period, by a smith named Awatagichi Yoshimitsu. The legend behind it says it was so destructively sharp that it could cut right through bone, and apparently it got its name after a user casually swung it at a friend and accidentally sliced through their bones. Pretty grim origin. So now Imu is dual-wielding, the Xingtian axe in one hand and Honabami Toshiro in the other. The clashing continues, and Imu presses Gaban on what he actually knows. Gaban tells him he knows the words of Joy Boy, but he immediately clarifies that he is not doing this for Joy Boy. He has no particular drive to follow the will of some figure from the distant past that he personally knows nothing about. What he cares about is seeing his captain's dream come true. That is what he is fighting for. Meanwhile, off to the side, Luffy is still on the ground, badly injured and visibly irritated at Gaban for looking down on him. In a very Luffy way, he is basically just telling his own body to heal itself, willing his wounds to recover through sheer stubbornness. Back in the fight, Imu is looking worse as it goes on. He is coughing and there is blood coming from his mouth, which suggests he is working under some kind of internal time constraint or pressure. The fight is wearing on him even as he holds his own. Imu gets back to the real topic and asks about this captain Gaban keeps referring to. Gaban tells him, Goldie Roger, the Pirate King. That name lands properly. Imu's mind goes to a memory from around the time Roger became Pirate King. Imu is shown being displeased that someone carrying the initial D has taken the title. He gives the order to the 5 elders to suppress Roger's true name and stop it from spreading, which is the origin of why the world came to know him as Gold Roger rather than Goldie Roger. Imu then, in the present, acknowledges Roger as the man who launched the great age of piracy and asks Gaban why a former crewmate of his would put himself at risk to protect Straw Hat Luffy. Gaban's answer is simple and direct. The very fact that Imu wants Luffy dead so desperately is exactly why Gaban trusts him. The way he sees it, if Imu, the king of the world himself, is this afraid of a kid, then his generation was right to wait for someone like him. As he says this, his mind goes through the faces of the people from that era. Roger, Rayleigh, Odin, Whitebeard, Shanks, Crocus. He remembers Roger telling the crew that someone would come who would surpass them all, and that they themselves had just arrived too early. Gaban believes Luffy is the one they have all been waiting for. That is when Imu decides enough talking. He summons a sentient omen flame and directs it straight at Luffy's chest, going past Gaban entirely, and targeting Luffy directly. As he does this, he says that Gaban is correct, that the world government was foolish and hasty, that they mistook numerous coincidences for fate, and that he is going to put an end to all of it now. Gaban sees the stigma flame heading for Luffy and moves immediately. Before launching his attack, Gaban apologizes to the treasure tree Atom for what he is about to do to it. He also grumbles about how old he is getting, noting that even jumping hurts his joints at this point. Luffy is still down on the ground, still being disrespectful toward Gaban even after everything. But before Imu's stigma flame can reach Luffy, Gaban unleashes Kamuto. Kamuto translates to Divine Gate. It is worth noting that this name follows a pattern with other techniques from Roger's crew. Roger and Shanks both used an attack called Kamasari, meaning Divine Departure. Now Gaban has a technique called Kamuto, Divine Gate. The attack itself is enormous. It channels advanced Conqueror's Haki on a scale that has not been seen before in this series. The width of the Haki output shears off and destroys multiple massive branches of the treasure tree Atom, each one described as being roughly small island-sized. This explicitly surpasses Garp's galaxy impact in terms of raw breadth of Conqueror's Haki, and it hits Imu directly. Imu raises a wall of omen flame channeled through both the Xingtian axe and Honobami Toshiro to absorb as much of the force as he can. The block holds against the worst of it, but not entirely. Imu takes visible damage from the hit. He ends up bleeding from the head. After taking that hit, Imu shifts into a more serious mode. He releases a massive surge of Conqueror's Haki himself. But even so, he acknowledges Gaban, saying that it does not matter how old he is still a crewmate of the Pirate King, and that much is clear. Gaban follows up Kamuto immediately with his biggest attack, Yachi Takeru. That name translates to 8,000 tribal leaders, and it is a significantly more powerful version of his earlier technique Yaso Takeru, which was 80 tribal leaders. Imu responds by pulling out an attack of his own, using Honobami, and then raises the Omen Flame Wall again with both the Xingtian Axe and Honobami Toshiro to try to absorb the hit. While this is happening, Imu asks Gaban if he is truly so determined to believe in Luffy. Gaban fires back that he could say the same thing about Imu. Yachitakaru tears directly into the treasure tree Atom. Massive island-sized chunks of its branches get sliced off and come crashing down into the underworld below, destroying the mountain terrain down there on impact. The whole battlefield has fallen apart around them. Up above, in the sun world where the Straw Hats and Loki are senses the overwhelming presence of Imu from all the way there. The sheer scale of what is happening is reaching across the world of Elbaf. Then the chapter cuts back to the aftermath. Luffy looks down to where Gaban landed after the crash, and what he sees stops him completely. Gaban is lying motionless on one of the severed tree branches. His left arm is gone. It has been cut off below the elbow, taken by Imu's Honobami Toshiro somewhere during that final clash. Gaban is down. Luffy stares at him in complete shock. That is where the chapter ends. The chapter picks up exactly where we left off. Luffy is trying to stand up, and the first thing he says is that if he reverts back to his normal form right now, things are going to get really bad. He pushes through it and makes his way back to Gaban's side. Clearly worn out, still bloody, barely holding himself together. He thanks Gaban for shielding him during the last exchange. Gaban's response is blunt. He tells Luffy he didn't lose an arm to protect a disappointment like him, he lost it fighting for Elbaf. And he is not going to end things like this. Luffy, completely exhausted, falls back down and asks what kind of person Imu actually is. Gaban gets serious, sitting there with one arm missing, and tells Luffy that Imu's true nature is a big secret, but if he had to put it into words, he would say the man is a god. The scene then shifts to the underworld. The animals living down there are reacting to a new presence that has just arrived among them, and that presence is Imu. Back in the previous chapter, Gaban used his Yakitakaru technique, which sent Imu crashing directly into the underworld. Now Imu is down there, visibly damaged and actually pretty hurt from that attack. He lets out a wave of Conqueror's Haki, which puts the surrounding animals to sleep. Then, lying there, he reflects on how things turned out. He says it was unforeseeable that those youths from God Valley would grow into such a nuisance. Had he known what they would eventually become this strong, he says he would have eliminated them alongside rocks during the God Valley incident. Then, right there in the depths of the underworld, Imu suddenly transforms. He grows noticeably larger. 2 additional horns sprout from his head, giving him 4 total. His arms go completely black. Without wasting a second after transforming, he looks up and leaps directly out of the underworld, shooting back up to the sun world and leaving omen flames burning on the ground behind him as he goes. The scene then cuts to the Owl Library. Chopper has arrived there with Robin, and Chopper is relieved to find that all the books are safe. Saul tells Chopper that Biblo, the chief librarian of the Owl Library, has been trying to say something and asks Chopper to go talk to him. Chopper finds this a bit surprising since Biblo had struck him as the silent type. He goes over anyway, and whatever Biblo tells him leaves Chopper completely shocked. The chapter does not show us what was said, but Chopper's reaction makes it very clear it was something significant. Back at the treasure tree Atom in the Sun World, Imu has just burst up from the underworld in his new transformed state, and seeing the form in full now, it just looks insane. He is bigger and more monstrous. The 3 horned skulls that used to hang around his tail are repositioned as a pendant on his chest. Giant black wings come out, his demon tail is still there, his hands and legs go dark, and the Hanabami sword appears in his hand. The spiked bracelets he had before are gone, replaced by 2 rings with eyes on his arms. The eye ring from his back shifts down to his waist. He has also grown a pointed goatee, and the Haki pressure exploding off him is overwhelming. Everything around them is shaking, and both Luffy and Gaban are getting thrown around just from the sheer force of it. Imu looks directly at Gaban and in a cold sort of way congratulates him, saying that only losing 1 arm from his last attack is actually impressive. Gaban fires right back, telling Imu he wanted to say the same thing, that walking out of his attack in one piece is a bit of a blow to his own reputation, though he does note he does not exactly have a hand left to applaud with anyway. Imu does not entertain it any further, and tells Gaban plainly that this next attack will not leave anything behind. Luffy is visibly shaken looking at Imu in this new form. Gaban turns to him and tells him directly to take his crew and leave Elbaf. In his mind, Elbaf is already done for, and he is preparing to stay behind and buy time so Luffy can get out. Luffy refuses. He is not running. Gaban pushes back, telling him he is in no condition to fight and is as good as dead if he stays. But before either of them can settle it, Imu comes in with a Honobami strike aimed at both of them. Gaban moves to shield Luffy, and Luffy at the same moment is telling Gaban to run away instead. Then Hajrudin arrives. He comes in with his Gungnir attack and punches Imu directly in the face so hard that it sends him flying straight into the treasure tree Atom. But even mid-air, Imu does exactly what he did before. He assumes the Omen stance and fires 3 Omen flames straight back at Hajrudin. The attack crashes into him and an explosion goes off. But Hajrudin blocks it with his shield, because he is not getting caught by the same thing twice. The shield breaks from the impact. Even so, Imu is visibly damaged from Hajrudin's hit, and that says a lot considering the transformed state he is in right now. Hajrudin has always had absurd raw strength going all the way back to his Dressrosa days, and it is showing here. Hajrudin then turns his attention to Gaban. He cannot believe that Gaban actually lost an arm. Gaban thanks him for the assist but immediately cuts to the point. He ignores his injuries and focuses on what actually matters. Imu is immortal. He cannot see a way to win this fight. He needs Hajrudin to make sure Luffy gets out of Elbaf safely. Hajrudin turns to Luffy and tells him he does not need to be in this fight. Luffy refuses again. Gaban asks what exactly he thinks he can do in that condition. Luffy just says he is going to recover right now. He says he ate a lot and he can make it happen, pushing through it by sheer force of will, in that completely absurd Luffy logic way. Gaban looks at him completely baffled, asking what kind of logic that even is, and tells him flatly that he cannot fight. And while they are still going back and forth, 3 more omen flames come flying straight at them. Luffy spots them and shouts that there are bombs incoming. Hajrudin moves fast, grabs both Luffy and Gaban in his hands, and takes all 3 omen flames directly with his own body to protect them both. He screams in pain. Gaban tells him to fall back. He can still walk away from this and fight another day. But Hajrudin refuses to yield. He tells Gaban that a true warrior must always be prepared to die in battle, declaring that Elbaf will never bend the knee. Gaban pushes back, telling him to consider the consequences of his death and what it would truly mean for everyone who depends on him. Hajrudin tells him it is fine, because Loki is here, and right on cue, Loki comes running in from behind. He tells Hajrudin well said, brother, and immediately tells everyone to get ready. Luffy takes a deep breath, forces himself upright, and announces he is back on his feet. Gaban just looks at all of them, genuinely amazed. Every single one of these fighters has taken massive damage, and yet somehow they are all standing again, ready to go. He cannot believe they still want to fight. The 3 of them line up. Loki with Ragnir, Hajrudin with his axe, and Luffy with his fists. They launch a combined assault straight at Imu, and Imu is seen preparing to block the incoming attack. The chapter ends right there on that moment, with Haki lightning visible across the panel. Their combined technique is called Gokoku Sovereignty, the sovereignty of the 3 generals. We do not see the result. We do not see how Imu takes it or what comes next. That is where Oda cuts it, and there is a break next week before we find out what happens.